Hello, fellow Canadians. When I hear phrases like degrowth is just not politically or economically feasible, I suspect the combination of the following: ignorance about degrowth, malicious intent, selfish protection of privileges, lack of empathy, elitist arrogance, or just flawed analysis. It doesn't take much effort to recognize that green growth and eco-modernism are utter delusions. They claim we can innovate our way out of the climate crises, social crises, political crises. Over and over again, it has been proven that disconnecting economic growth from ecological damage cannot happen fast enough in absolute terms. Considering that we have breached 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries, we do not have time to fool around as a society if we want to avoid collapse of economies and large-scale tragic social unrest. Why do some Canadians dismiss degrowth? Since the 2012 Montreal conference, degrowth has not seen much advance in the public opinion, unlike in Europe that gave birth to the concept. Is it because Canadians are so in love with their oversized houses, cottages, SUVs, lawnmowers, golf courses, spending sprees, stock portfolios, the $200,000 and more salary plus bonuses? Is it because Canadians are afraid not to upset the Americans? Is it because the Atlas network has utter domination over public narratives? Is it the deeply ingrained fetish with meritocracy? The honest answer is we don't know. We should not assume to know what all Canadians think about degrowth, about their ideal lifestyle, about how to increase well-being for everyone, about how to stop environmental destruction, about how to phase out capitalism. Professor Richard Sandbrook writes, "We must rapidly make a green energy transition. This transition cannot happen unless people, including those employed in fossil fuel industries, see a better future at the end." Correct. That is what degrowth can do for everyone, including fossil fuel workers. One should not dismiss the word degrowth itself simply because of perception about how the syllable D rings in the ears of the growth-obsessed elites. How about we unpack what degrowth actually proposes? A review of degrowth policy proposals found 530 different proposals split into 13 policy themes. The most interesting proposals actually aim to dismantle capitalism by dealing with fundamental constructions, the definition of property, the need for rationing and material caps on production and consumption, the fair and just amount of minimum and maximum wealth, the inequality of the ecological footprint of individuals and nations, the introduction of economic democracy, which is absent under capitalism, the massive expansion of human rights from housing to universal basic services. Who can say no to this? This year, in an informal setting organized by Justice for Workers, I asked about 36 Canadians, middle class and working class, what they thought about making housing a human right, namely nationalizing the for-profit housing, which would literally phase out price-gouging landlords and then making residents equal owners in housing co-ops, all this to solve the housing crisis without relying only on market solutions, and having a maximum wealth limit of $10 million. The answers I received: unanimous support for both policy proposals, which, by the way, are advanced by degrowth scholars and activists. Earlier this year, in a debate at the University of Toronto where I defended degrowth against green growth, a whopping 80% of audience members, roughly 50 people, supported degrowth. Does this not make degrowth very politically acceptable? Can we remember how politically acceptable was the abolition of slavery, universal suffrage, the weekend, the 8-hour workday, paid vacation, paid family leave, civil rights, marriage equality? Richard Sandbrook writes, "A Green New Deal could be more effective at delivering positive ecological change than green growth and would likely be more feasible in the short term than a degrowth model. Okay, we know that green growth is rubbish. When we talk about a Green New Deal, what are we actually talking about? What are the policies proposed under a so-called capitalist-friendly Green New Deal? Some folks believe that degrowth is desirable but improbable, and we can have a radical Green New Deal and get to keep capitalism at the same time. Have the cake and eat it too? We have heard about this before. But hold on, what do we mean by capitalism? Is it about free markets, free enterprise, private ownership of the means of production? What is at stake here that we are so afraid of demonizing capitalism for all its crimes? What are the quiet parts not said out loud? The heart of the matter is the elitist, inhumane, exploitative, unjust, unfair, unstable, amoral, immoral, sociopathic, hubristic, exclusive, egregious, affluent design of capitalism. The link between property, which are equity shares, and power, the ability to dictate decisions in corporations, is proportional, therefore profoundly anti-democratic. You have one share, you have one vote. Employees who do not own shares have no voice in how the companies ought to be run, how much to produce, what to produce, how to set the prices, who gets paid and how much, who gets to be a boss, how profits are shared. This doctrine of proportionality must be phased out and replaced with a doctrine along the lines of power by equal sentience. That is, if we want to progress as a civilization. How on earth can we keep growing the material economy and satisfy the design of capitalism if we agree that we cannot have infinite growth on a finite planet, and that capitalism cannot exist without the profit incentive? Should we then not bite the bullet, be honest, and say that capitalism must be phased out using degrowth policies so we can phase in a new economic system that provides well-being for everyone? What would the degrowth Green New Deal look like for Canada? Of course, degrowth advocates for the phasing out of capitalism, no doubt about that. Degrowth aims at the heart of capitalism, its undemocratic structures. There's nothing special about Canada in terms of how asset managers, investment bankers, stockbrokers, venture capitalists conduct their affairs. What is specific about Canada is an innate cultural deference to the United States, a superficial mentality of cultural geographical isolationism from the rest of the world, which comes with the arrogance that fossil fuels can be extracted in Alberta and elsewhere with impunity, entitlement over the lands that were stolen from the First Nations, and all too often ignorance about the plunder of labor, energy, and resources that happens in the majority world, often known as the Global South, to sustain shameless sprawl and consumerism here. So let's do a degrowth radical Green New Deal in Canada. We begin with permanent nationwide citizens' assemblies that will be tasked to provide answers to the following questions and more. What is the fair amount for a maximum wealth limit for all Canadians? What is the procedure to establish housing as a human right? How can we protect the entire biosphere, of which we are all members, against the interest of profit seekers? How can we establish a job guarantee program that eliminates unemployment, creates well-paid, decent, necessary jobs for all those who want it? How much should the maximum income or maximum wage gap be? How can we expand public transportation nationwide and make it free, sustainable, and ultra-accessible? How can we phase out the stock market while maintaining fair value of pensions and savings to build real value in the economy that is connected with the physical world? How can we build sustainable provisioning systems for healthy food and essential products? How can we phase in economic democracy and phase out the profit motive? How can we pay for our ecological responsibility to contribute to global climate and social justice? This would be just the beginning. We will know what the entire country actually believes once we engage all Canadians in the process. We will have crowdsourced policies to back up the public sentiment. Whatever government will occupy Parliament Hill in Ottawa, they will be forced to listen and execute the will of Canadians. We should also remember that there's big public support for this kind of transformation worldwide. In the world's largest standalone survey on climate change, 72% of people globally said that they want their country to move away from fossil fuels to clean energy quickly. 62% of Canadians said their country needs to give more to help the poorer countries to address climate change. 47% of Canadians are more worried, and 40% are about the same worried about climate change compared to last year. A survey of people in 34 European countries found that, on average, 61% of people favor post-growth. There is one way of saying degrowth without saying it. A survey study done by the German Environment Agency found that 88% agree that we must find ways of living well regardless of economic growth, and 77% agree that there are natural limits to growth and we went beyond them. 70% of more than 10,000 people surveyed in 29 high-income and middle-income countries believe that overconsumption is putting our planet and society at risk. 65% believe that our society would be better off if people shared more and owned less. A study exploring two survey datasets found that 61% of the Spanish public hold growth-critical positions, such as A-growth or degrowth, with less than one-third of respondents in the survey expressing support for green growth. A responsible consumption survey found that 52% of French people believe that we need to review all or part of our economic model and get away from the myth of infinite growth. Poll shows that 81% of people in Britain believe that the prime objective of the government should be to secure the greatest happiness for people rather than the greatest wealth. 2 in 3 people across 17 G20 countries surveyed, 68%, agree that the way the economy works should prioritize the health and well-being of people and nature, rather than focusing solely on profit and increasing wealth. Another French study found that 67% of respondents had a favorable or quite favorable opinion of the term degrowth. Importantly, people from all the political spectrum had a majority favorable opinion of degrowth, 85% for the far left and 59% for the far right. Degrowth, post-capitalism are actually very popular among scholars and citizens. A survey of nearly 500 sustainability scholars found that 77% called for post-growth pathways in high-income countries. A study of European citizens' assemblies found that sufficiency policies enjoy very high approval rates, 93%. A survey shows that a majority of people around the world, 56%, agree with the statement, "Capitalism does more harm than good." In France, it is 69%, and in India, it is 74%. A 2018 poll shows that 70% of US citizens believe that environmental protection is more important than economic growth. How about that? When are we actually going to talk to all Canadians about what they actually think, instead of jumping to opinions that degrowth is not politically feasible in Canada? Dear Canadians, don't be afraid about degrowth. That syllable D is also in front of beautiful words like democracy, decent, delicious. Degrowth is the path from crisis to well-being. Once you realize that infinity, the wet desire of growth-seeking capitalism, cannot fit into finitude, which is planet Earth, you will suddenly have agency to agree that capitalism must go, so we can phase in sustainable well-being for everyone forever. If you can, please support me through the links below to cover the cost of these videos. Future videos will not be possible without your support. I will never speak to advertisers and never take their money. Until next time, be well, increase the peace.